afternoon. My name is Kathy Lynch, and I am the new host of Second Opinion. I will be interviewing our guest here, Jim Lyons, who is the recent state committee man for the Republican Party. Did I say it right? The new state chair for the Republican Party.
Yes.
And some people like to say it as the Mass GOP chair. So I will be now the new host, and I am the chair of the Westford Republican Town Committee, which is sponsoring this show. I have compiled a number of questions. I'd like to kind of go through them. And the first one is, first of all, let me congratulate you.
Thank you.
So Jim Lyons won by a vote of 47-30. And I was at that event. It was a very exciting night, and I want to congratulate you and wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Kathy.
So tell us who was in that position before. Give us a little history about who's been in that position and how long the term is and how long the last person's term was.
So Kirsten Hughes was elected 6 years ago, and she served as the chairperson for 6 years. And it's elected every 2 years. So the term itself comes up in 24 months. So my term would come up sometime, 24 months. We just got elected in January. So,
wow.
So Kirsten was able to serve for 6 years, decided not to run this year, and opened up an opportunity, and we ran for it, and we got elected.
Terrific. Are there any particular requirements that you had to fulfill to become a chair?
You have to be a Republican, and you have to live in Massachusetts, and I fit into both of those categories. I did have some experience in the legislature. I was a state representative for 8 years. Was defeated in November. Involuntarily retired is what I like to tell people. And this opportunity opened up, and I decided, on the advice of my wife, that I should consider running for it. And we ran, and the election was January 17th. And as you pointed out, it was a very exciting night, and we're looking forward to making the Mass GOP great again.
That's great. And what does the chairman do?
So I think the primary responsibility of the chairman is to try to build the party, to try to increase our legislative seats, to try to increase the number of elected Republicans that we have throughout Massachusetts. And, we've already begun that process. I've met with the members of the Senate, the Republican members of the Senate, and we're meeting with the Republican members of the legislative, getting prepared for 2020. And we're also meeting with local candidates to try to elect, more local folks to the team. I think it's real important that we have balance in Massachusetts, which currently we don't have. We've got so many more Democrats than we do Republicans, and I don't think that helps anybody in our communities. There has to be open and fair debate, and my job is to try to increase those ranks.
I think they'll really appreciate it. All the candidates that are going to run, they'll really appreciate that support. So there are now only 6 Republicans in the 40 Senate member Senate and 32 in the 160 House. And you can see by those numbers that we're in really bad shape. So we really need to grow the party. So how do you think that we can do that?
Well, I think one of the first things we have to take a look at is what's the makeup of the state. Currently, we have 1,500,000 Democrats, 475,000 Republicans, and 2.5 million unenrolled. So one of the things that we're going to do is reach out to the unenrolled, because there's a large percentage of those that historically will vote Republican. And what we have to do is take a look at the playing field and recognize we have to get more members on our team. So we're going to be reaching out to people in each of the Republican town committees and asking them to go out and help us recruit people and talk about our message versus the Democratic message. Our message is, all we have to look to is Ronald Reagan, and back in the 80s when he took over and taught Americans what we were all about, which is about freedom and personal responsibility. You take that message of Ronald Reagan and you compare it to the message of the Democratic Party today, which is one of a radical socialist view. we win hands down when you talk about what America really stands for and what the Democrats are trying to make America. So I think we have to get out in the trenches. We have to get out and knock on doors. We have to talk to our friends and neighbors and say, is this the direction we want America to go? It's that serious right now. The headlines every day are what the Democrats want to do to this country, and they want to fundamentally change it. And we have to stand up and promote what America is truly about, which is about freedom and individual responsibility. It's about the individual, not about government telling us what to do. And that's what we intend to do.
I absolutely love that message. And I know you've probably thought about this long and hard, and you have experience as a state rep. And I think that's a terrific message. So I applaud you for kind of pushing those two words out there. I think you got your finger on the pulse, really what needs to happen, because you're right, there is a big push for socialism, and we do have to contrast that. We have to show what either side has.
Exactly.
And
I've been in business since I was 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I started selling flowers on a street corner when I was a senior at Brandeis, and had 25 street corners when I was still in college. My wife and I are still in business, the same business that we started 43 years ago. The name of our company is Dandelions. Now we sell flowers, ice cream, and Christmas trees. We just finished a very busy week. Valentine's week is always very busy in the flower business. But to me, that's what the American dream is being able to go out on your own, start your own business if that's what you want to do, go work for a company if that's what you want to do. But remember that the fruits of your labor should belong to us and not belong to government. And the message that Ronald Reagan gave us back in that difficult time when we were coming out of the 70s into the 80s is crystal clear what our country stands for. And we kind of lost sight of that in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And we're losing sight of that now. And that's why, as a Republican, I grew up a Democrat. I grew up in a Democratic household. But the Democratic Party of the 60s and 70s is so far removed to what the Democratic Party is today. And I encourage everybody to take a look at this and recognize just how important this is. It is about freedom and individual responsibility. You put that up against what the Democrats, when you see some of the Democrats and their policies right now, Bernie Sanders, they're promoting socialism, mm-hmm. and their radical view of the world and what they want us to accept. If we don't do something about it, we only have ourselves to blame.
Right. The government is just getting so big that the people are losing more freedom.
Right.
Right. And I've seen it in my lifetime just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
And I don't know if everyone recognizes that.
I think, let's assume that they don't recognize it. I think what we have to remind them is what America is, and it's about individual responsibility and personal freedoms. And the Democrats are consistently chipping away at that, and we have to talk about our message. Our message is clear, and we should be happy about what our message is. How good is it that we live in a country that we are free, and that we have the right to do what we want, and we can't lose those freedoms, and we have to protect them, and we have to fight for them. The left and the radical left are pushing for their agenda, and we have to stand up and fight.
Right.
It's a critical time in our country.
You say that we're a free country. In many respects, we are not. People are losing a lot of their freedom already, and you're right about having to fight for it. People, whatever they're dealing with, they have to fight for it, because it's like any bully; they will take advantage if you don't stand up against it.
Right.
So I think that's great what you're saying. There are many Republicans who question whether Governor Charlie Baker is really a Republican. He has been known as socially liberal and fiscally conservative. But recently, Baker has raised taxes to $42 billion. So now he isn't even seen as fiscally conservative by many. Peter Lucas from the Lowell Sun wrote, quote, "For many people in and out of the State House, Baker, if not a Democrat, certainly talks, acts, governs, and gets elected like one." So I ask you, Jim, what changes, if any, would you like to see in the relationship between the governor and the Republican Party?
I think what you're pointing out is reality as opposed to actually what Charlie Baker is. He is a governor in a state that is overwhelmingly controlled at the legislative level by Democrats. We cannot sustain his vetoes. I served in the legislature, and Governor Baker vetoed $565 million in state spending, and yet we were unable to sustain even one of his vetoes because the Democrats in lockstep vote to overturn any veto that Charlie Baker put in place. So I think what we have is a governor who's trying. I've watched, I've stood with him, trying to control spending. However, because of the overwhelming majorities in both the House and the Senate, even though he puts in place reforms, the Democrats are successful in the fact that they were able to, overturn some of his reforms. So I think that points to the real issue, and that's the issue that I bring to the table is people ask, how do we change it? Well, we certainly change it, and having a governor who is in there, despite the way you worded the question, right, in there trying to keep taxes down, in there trying to reduce spending, it's the Democrats who ultimately have control because they have the numbers. So the way we do that is to control the agenda at the legislative levels. And what we need to do is increase from 32 to 54. That will at least give us the ability to sustain a gubernatorial veto. So I think Governor Baker, given he has to run a government. That's his job. Our job as legislators, and now my job as chairman of the party, is to grow the party and to give the support to our governor and our next governor so that we can actually take some positive action about the way money is being spent. 43% of the state budget right now is spent on mass health. Just think about that. That happened in the Deval Patrick administration. Governor Baker tried to put in reforms, and the Democrats wouldn't allow it to take place. So I think on the fiscal issues, Governor Baker, has done the best job that's possible given the restraints that he has. And I think what we have to do as Republicans is, as I mentioned at the beginning, get more of us on the field to help him.
I think there's a need for unity, and we need to work together. So I like that you're saying that, we have to support the governor and that he's kind of held back, and increasing the numbers, which is your job,
right,
can help that situation. And I think if we could all work together, that would be great, and have a unified message.
Yeah.
Because there is definitely some difference between where Republicans stand. I know that's also true where Democrats, there's different factions and different belief systems within, but we need to find some kind of commonality, right?
If we were to just take the governor's vetoes and put those in place, which at every turn the Democratic majority overran his vetoes, then people would be beginning to look at it and say that he is a fiscal conservative, because he is. He's done things fiscally conservative that have improved the state, but because of the lack of authority that we have legislatively, it's almost impossible. He has to basically negotiate every single thing he has to do, because he can't win it at the legislative level, because it's controlled by the top at the Democratic Party. It's not controlled by the group. The Speaker of the House and the Senate President yield incredible power, and that's what they've done. I've watched it firsthand. They rule with an iron fist. They want what they want, and they keep their rank and file members in line.
And so what you're saying is that the Speaker actually has more power than the governor,
The
correct?
Speaker, there's no question right now in the legislative branch, the Speaker of the House has the power, and he flexes his muscles. And the pay raise that they just put in place only gave him more power, because the stipends that they gave some of the legislative leaders are significant. They gave some folks $35,000, $40,000 a year. So if you're beholden to the Speaker of the House for that $40,000, what are you going to do? Well, we see what the Democrats do. They all do what they're told. And that's wrong. And the taxpayers and the citizens of this state are suffering and being penalized because we have such strong one-party rule, and it's ruled with an iron fist. Speaker DeLeo tells people what to do, and they do it. Hate to be so blunt about it, but that's how it is. I stood in there and sat in there for 8 years, and I watched it, and that's how the Democrats in Massachusetts, they don't get up and debate. They do exactly what they're told.
Well, I'm glad you're keeping an eye on that. Let's see if we can do anything about that.
I think the goal is to beat them. I mean, we have to level the playing field, and the only way we level the playing field is we run people for office, we get people engaged, we become part of the process, we raise money, and we go out and say the basic principle that we talked about. It's about individual freedoms, and the Democratic Party, both nationally and in this state, want to take our freedoms away from us. It's pure and simple.
And you have the full support of Baker with that plan?
Yeah, Governor Baker, there's no one that would want to see more folks in the legislature than Charlie Baker, because then he could implement the policies that he wants. And he had to do so many things. Just to take the homelessness, we had, I think it was 1,000 or 1,100 people living in motels and hotels. And because of the way he did things administratively, he was able to take all of those folks out of hotels and get them into their own apartments. That was done because he saw a problem, he recognized it, and did something about it. Those are things that people don't hear about. You know, they hear about the things that, that make the headlines. They don't recognize that this administration has worked diligently to keep a lid on spending, and they've done a decent job at that. But at the same time, when he puts in reforms to reduce taxes and to reduce fees, the Democrats historically, in the 8 years that I was there, the 4 years under Baker and the 4 years under Deval Patrick, they didn't know a tax increase that they didn't like. And they didn't want to see any reforms.
Yeah. So about your seat in the House of Representatives, you were there for 8 or 6?
8 years.
8 years, that's what I thought. And can you tell us something about what it was like to be on that seat?
I enjoyed being in the legislature. When I first walked in there, I really, I'm a business owner. I've been in business forever. So this was all new to me to walk in there. And when I first walked in, I thought that there was going to be a lot of give and take, a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, discussions with the Democrats, discussions with our own party. And what I found is exactly what I just told you. There's no debate. Everything is done. When they talk about things done behind closed doors, that's how Beacon Hill operates. And it operates to the detriment of every single taxpayer in this community and in this state. And I spent my years in there trying to expose what the Democrats were trying to do. I love telling the story about 1 year, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, I filed an amendment with Representative Lombardo from Billerica to take $250 million from the money that is being spent on illegal immigrants and take that to send it back to our local communities to reduce property taxes. And after I made my speech, I walked back, and there's a scoreboard that's has everyone's name on it, and green stands for yes, and obviously red stands for no. Mm-hmm. And when I got back to my seat, the whole board had lit up green, which meant that all the Democrats had voted with me to give money back to the cities and towns. And when I got back to my seat, I said to my colleagues, I said, what's going on? They're voting with us. He said they don't understand what they were voting on. Sure enough, within a minute, the speaker recognized that there was a mistake made. He switched from green to red, and every Democrat in the House switched their vote. That's what I mean about a top-down approach.
You mean he switches first and then they just follow suit?
Exactly.
So he gets the first switch?
When he votes and they see it, they all switch their vote.
And they wait for his vote, is that correct?
Sometimes they do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Unless it's
We're learning a lot today.
Yeah, it's the way it is. I mean, I'm like the kid that snuck into the movie and get to see what they did. And they did it all the time. I mean, they rule with an iron fist. They ran things through when they can. And there is no open debate. It's all done based on a script from Speaker DeLeo.
One of the things I noticed was that the legislators don't even get a chance to read the bills, or not much of a chance. So how can they understand what they're voting on?
So there was just a rules debate in the House just about 2 weeks ago, and there was many amendments made by the Republicans to open up the debate. As a matter of fact, some of the progressives that have just got elected also were interested in opening up the debate. Each and every one of those rules was voted down by the Democratic leadership.
I saw that.
They just don't want the process to be open. They want it closed. They want it tight. They don't want the people to know what's going on in there. And the only way we change that is by electing more Republicans.
I think that's part of the message, too, that needs to be portrayed, right?
Oh, yeah, no question
Yeah,
about
I mean,
it.
if they're not serving the people, they're serving themselves more, right?
That's exactly what's happening. And the pay raise that they gave to themselves in 2017, we had all got elected in November of 2016. 60 days later, on our first piece of business in the legislature. So just picture yourself, you're newly elected, so you're newly hired. You knew what the salary was when you applied for the job. You walk in to your boss and you say to your boss, I don't want this salary. I want a $50,000 increase. That's what happened with that pay raise. They came in the first day of session and they decided that they were going to increase salaries to the Speaker of the House by $75,000 and to the chairman of the different committees, all Democrats, by thousands and thousands of dollars. And they did it not because it was right. They did it because they can do it, because they control the legislative process.
Now, I've brought that up to people before, and they say to me, Democrats usually say to me, well, they deserved that raise. They didn't get enough pay as it was. So how do you respond to that?
Well, the average salary in Massachusetts, I think, is around $60,000. That's the per capita salary. Maybe it's a little higher now. So what they basically did was gave themselves a salary that was 100% of that. So in other words, the Speaker of the House went from $80,000 to $140,000 or $150,000. How is that fair? They gave salaries to chairmen. They increased from $15,000 to $35,000, a third of what the average person makes.
Yeah, that's a little bit extravagant.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
That's not a little bit, a lot of it.
on a percentage basis, I made an amendment to give the stipends, 3%. That's what everybody. That's what the cost of living was, and they shot that down. There's no justification for the salary structure that they put in place in January of 2017. None.
Well, I think it's great that you're getting out here talking about this
Yeah.
because a lot of people just are not aware.
No, people are not aware what goes on in
Yeah,
there.
and I think, well, let's just hope that you get more of the message out.
Yeah.
Can you share any lessons that you learned or suggestions for those legislators that are in there to do a good job? Like what would you like to see our legislators do and do well?
So I think one of the things that people have to realize when you're an elected official is you have to remember who sent you to Beacon Hill. And I think you always have to remember that it was the people. You went there because these people had confidence that you were going to go in and take on whatever you said you were going to do. And I think people have to be true to that. In other words, when you go to Beacon Hill, don't get caught up. You walk in that beautiful building and all of a sudden people forget who sent them there. And I think that's the message to every single person that's an elected official. You represent the people who sent you there. And what I have seen time and time again is people get caught up in the environment. It's like an echo chamber. There's 160 people that just talking to each other. And many times they forget the regular, taxpayer who sent them there. And I think that's critically important for all legislators to try to adhere to that and remember. And it's also critically important for the taxpayers and the voters to remind them who sent them there, and not to be silent, to reach out to your legislators. Tell them when you like what they do, but also tell them when you don't like what they do. I think it's critically important that people become engaged in the process.
Yeah, thank you for that advice to the legislators and to the people. Do you believe in term limits?
I didn't, but I do now because I've seen how the power structure on Beacon Hill has become so rooted in individuals. And the Beacon Hill will survive without me. They'll survive without anybody. We need people to go in there bringing new ideas all the time. And if we had term limits, we wouldn't see this top-down problem that exists right now. The Speaker of the House took over for Sal DeMacy. Sal DeMacy went to jail. The last 3 Speakers of the House before DeLeo went to jail. DeLeo was an unindicted co-conspirator in the probation scandal. It's because the structure of Beacon Hill is so tight and so closed that it's almost impossible to break. The only way we can break it is by leveling the playing field, opening the process up. We won't do that unless we elect more Republicans. You listening out there?
It certainly creates balance.
It does.
It certainly does that.
And I'm not. There's no question it creates balance, and right now we don't have that.
Right.
And they can do what they want because they can.
Right.
Because
right.
they can.
And they're happy doing it, though.
They're completely happy. They're getting, not only that, they're getting paid huge, big salaries to do it.
Right.
You know, the salary structure. I mean, it's one thing to pay a legislator $60,000 a year, you know, and no matter what they tell you, it's a part-time job.
It's more than that now, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
72,000 or something.
Right. It's different when they're paying. Some of these senators are getting paid $130,000 a year. They want you to think that this is a full-time job. A lot of them have things on the side. I had something on my family's business. There's lawyers, there's insurance people. The fact that they took it to the crazy level that they took it to is unfair to every taxpayer in the Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're winding down. Here's a 2-part question for you. For past and future Republican candidates, what would you like to say to all those Republicans who worked so hard in the midterms but lost? And what would you like to say to any want-to-be Republicans who are thinking of running for seats in local, state, and federal races?
So the comment to those that lost is don't lose faith. Is you never know how much you contributed to the next person that might win. I happened to win as a state representative because someone had run twice before me and had exposed what my opponent was all about. So I was the beneficiary of all the efforts that person put into place. So I don't think that what you did or what people did is in vain, because it isn't. It's so important to offer the people of Massachusetts a choice, and that's what people who ran did. They provided an alternative to what the status quo is. And the second thing is we need Republicans who want to get in there. Don't make a career out of it. Go in there, make a difference. Talk about the issues that are important to you. Recognize that it might take you a couple of times to get yourself elected, because you've got to build your name and your recognition. But I encourage people to get involved in the process. I had the best time of my life for 8 years. I couldn't have had more fun, but I also know that, you know, it's time for me. First of all, I lost, but it was also getting close to the time where I was probably not going to run again anyhow, because people should come in. They should come in and be part of the process. I encourage people to get involved, get engaged, and if they're a Republican, let me know, because we're looking for candidates all up and down the ticket: school committees, selectmen, city council, representative, and senators. So I really encourage people. It's a great opportunity for people to get engaged and help their communities.
So you say that they should contact you?
Yeah, any Republican that wants to run, or an independent that I could convince to become a Republican, that's exactly what we want. We want people to reach out. We have done, one of the things that the Republican Party has done in the last 6 years is put in place a solid database system, solid system to help candidates. My job now is to take and implement that to a better level than had been in place in the last 6 years. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I think I can, with my legislative background, with my business background, I think we can certainly, we're going to have some fun exposing the Democrats for what they are, radical socialists. And that's what I hope to do.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And to the viewers, if you're ever confused or have a question on anything, you want a second opinion, you need to take another look. I'm Kathy Lynch, and this is Second Opinion.